Everyone in the Weasley family is so pure and down to earth. Everyone, that is, except for Percy Weasley. If you've only seen the films, you don't know what a jerk Percy was and how much he put his family through, especially his kind-hearted mother. In this video, I'm going to cover Percy Weasley's arc in the books and explain his entire life from books 1 to 7, as well as some details that Rowling released after the series ended. Now remember, this video is based on the books, not the movies. There are some major differences. Before we start, I make new videos every week, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on to make sure you never miss a Movie Flame video. Now let's get started. Percy was born to Arthur and Molly Weasley and was one of 7, having 5 brothers and 1 sister. He was the third born after his brothers Bill and Charlie, and had 3 younger brothers, Fred, George, and Ron, and 1 younger sister named Ginny. The Weasleys were a pureblood family, but unlike other pureblood families who were very rich, the Weasleys were very poor, something that bothered Percy far more than it bothered anyone else in the family. His father worked in the ministry, something that Percy always strived to do as well, but he knew that he would be more successful than his father, who worked in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office, a job that Percy felt had little worth. Percy did not fit in with his other brothers, who were all Quidditch obsessed and constantly outdoors. Percy would ignore them and instead would stay inside to read and study, always having the goal of a successful future on his mind. He had a plan mapped out, and he hoped to end his career becoming the Minister of Magic. Percy grew up during the height of the First Wizarding War, and in that war, he lost his uncles Fabian and Gideon, who fought in the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's alliance to fight Voldemort and his Death Eaters. The war came to an end, however, when Percy was 5 years old, and this was thanks to a baby named Harry Potter after Voldemort tried to kill him and failed. Percy watched his 2 older brothers, Bill and Charlie, go off to Hogwarts, and when the time finally came for him to go, he was ecstatic. In his first year, he joined a 6th-year Bill and a 4th-year Charlie, and just like both of them and his parents, Percy was sorted into Gryffindor. Oliver Wood was also in his year, though Percy did not have much in common with him, as Oliver was Quidditch obsessed, something that Percy was not too interested in. Percy took school very seriously and worked harder than most students, and as a result, he got top marks in every class. Percy had a pet rat named Scabbers, and one day he lost him. This made him be in a bad mood, and during that bad mood, he caught kids using magic outside of class, and he planned on reporting them, but then decided not to when they said that they would help him find Scabbers. Percy's brothers, Fred and George, eventually came to Hogwarts as well, and Percy was unhappy with them a lot of the time due to the fact that they broke too many rules to count, pulled pranks on him and many other students, and in Percy's eyes, caused mayhem wherever they went. Percy was constantly feeling embarrassed to call them his siblings, especially because before them, he was proud of his older siblings, both of whom were prefects, and Bill was even a head boy. Because of this, Percy was very happy when he too was made a prefect, giving him power over his twin brothers, and he hoped to exercise some control over them, but that of course did not pan out. After getting his confirmation letter and his prefect badge the summer before starting his 5th year, he did nothing but talk about his new status, something that annoyed the heck out of his entire family. To reward Percy for becoming a prefect, his parents bought him new robes and a new owl named Hermes, something that was a big deal in their family due to their lack of wealth. Now having an owl, Percy passed his pet Scabbers down to his younger brother Ron, who was starting his 1st year at Hogwarts. That September, Percy was very proud to sit in the prefect's compartment on the way to school in the Hogwarts Express, and he proudly told his mother this before leaving, though the result of this was just Fred and George making fun of him. During the sorting that year, Percy got up excitedly to shake the famous Harry Potter's hand after he was sorted into Gryffindor. When the time came to lead the first years to the Gryffindor common room, Percy once again stepped up, very proud of his position. On Halloween, a troll was led into the school, and when Dumbledore told the prefects to lead their houses back to their common rooms, Percy was in his element, once again stepping up very proudly and pushing his chest out to show his badge. On Christmas, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley decided to go to Egypt to visit Bill, so Percy along with Fred, George, and Ron stayed at Hogwarts for the holiday, and when he opened his mother's present, a sweater with the letter P on it, Fred seized it and jokingly said that the P was for prefect. The twins then forced the sweater on him despite Percy's protests. That night, Fred and George stole Percy's prefect badge, and Percy chased them around the common room trying to get it back, to the delight of Harry and Ron, who watched laughing. Percy took his OWL exams that year, something that was very important for a wizard's future, so Percy of course took these exams very seriously. He ended up taking a staggering 12 OWLs, and he got top marks. At the end of term feast, Percy became very proud of Ron as he helped earn Gryffindor last-minute points to win the House Cup, and Percy shouted this to everyone over the cheers. Before going home that year, Percy had grown close to a Ravenclaw prefect named Penelope Clearwater, and the two began dating before the summer holidays. Terrified of what his family would say, especially the twins, he kept his relationship with Penelope a secret. During the summer, he spent a lot of time shut in his room, sending many letters to his girlfriend, and he only came down for meal times, leading to his siblings being suspicious of what he was doing. When the family went to Diagon Alley to get school supplies, Percy found a book called Prefects Who Gained Power, a study of Hogwarts prefects and their later careers, and he was deeply immersed in it until Ron came over and made a sarcastic comment, making Percy telling him to go away. Throughout the following school year, Percy and Penelope met in secret all over the school to kiss, and it was important to Percy to keep it a secret because he didn't want his siblings to know. During the school year, Mrs. Norris, the caretaker Filch's cat, was petrified, and standing there for everyone to see was Ron, Harry, and Hermione. After the incident, Ginny, who had just started her first year, was very upset, crying her eyes out, and Percy tried to comfort his sister. Thinking that she was upset about Ron, he told her that Ron would not be expelled and that everything would be okay. A little while after the attack, Percy screamed out at Ron after catching him in a girl's bathroom right next to the scene of the crime. He scolded Ron, telling him how bad this looked, and then said that Ginny was upset because of him. Ron got angry and said that Percy did not care about Ginny, he just didn't want Ron to mess up his chances of being head boy. Percy took 5 points from Gryffindor and said that if he caught Ron again, he would write to their mother. More attacks began to come, this time on students, so when Christmas break came around, Percy stayed at Hogwarts, saying he was doing his duty as a prefect to support the teachers during this troubled time. On Christmas Day, the twins bewitched Percy's prefect badge to say Pinhead instead of prefect, and unaware of this, Percy became angry as he demanded to know what everyone was laughing at. One night during break, Percy ran into who he thought was Crabbe and Goyle, but really it was Harry and Ron, and he told them to get back to their common room as it wasn't safe to be wandering the corridors at night. Ron then pointed out that he was, and Percy responded saying that because he was a prefect, nothing would attack him. One day when Percy and Penelope were sneaking around the school, Ginny walked in on them kissing, and Percy, very embarrassed, made Ginny promise not to tell anyone. Percy's feeling of invincibility thanks to his prefect status was wiped away at once when his girlfriend Penelope was petrified. Percy was horror-struck and devastated after finding this news out. He sat in the common room looking pale and stunned, and for once, he did not seem keen to make his views heard on the matter, too upset to speak. At the very end of term, the Weasleys got the worst news possible. Ginny had been taken down to the chamber, and a note in the corridor said that her skeleton would lie there forever. Percy left his siblings to write his parents and tell them the bad news, and when he returned to the common room, he did not sit with his siblings, but shut himself in his room. Luckily, Ron and Harry managed to save her, and Percy was thrilled that his sister was alright. He got even more good news when Penelope and all of the other victims were brought back, and Percy was so happy to have his girlfriend back. However, his mood was brought down a bit after Ginny told everyone about his relationship, and Fred and George took every chance they had to tease him about it. That summer, Percy was thrilled when he got the news that he would be head boy, the thing that he had been working towards since his first year at Hogwarts. The night before the start of the next term, Percy accused Ron of stealing his badge, and the two had a big fight. As Percy dismantled his and Ron's room at the Leaky Cauldron, the twins were in the landing heaving with laughter as they held his badge. At King's Cross, Percy smoothed his hair and puffed his chest out when he saw Penelope so that she would see his head boy badge. When Sirius Black came to Hogwarts, a man who everyone thought to be an escaped murderer, everyone had to sleep in the Great Hall, and Dumbledore told Percy that he was in charge of the students, something that made Percy look immensely proud and important. After this incident, Mrs. Weasley told Percy to watch over Harry to make sure he was safe, and Percy tailed Harry everywhere like an extremely pompous guard dog. Percy's Ravenclaw girlfriend Penelope ended up getting Percy a bit more into Quidditch, and when the time came, the two bet 10 galleons on who would win in the Gryffindor vs Ravenclaw match. Before the match, Percy said to Harry in an urgent whisper to make sure that he won, because he did not have 10 galleons. Luckily, Harry ended up winning it for Gryffindor, and after the match, Percy told him that he had done well, then strode off to find Penelope to get his 10 galleons. That night, Percy came out of his room to chaos, and when he found out that it all stemmed from Ron claiming to have seen Sirius Black standing over him with a knife, Percy told his brother that that was nonsense. Percy then became enraged when McGonagall came in and scolded everyone for still partying, and said that she expected more from Percy. He tried to defend himself, but McGonagall wasn't listening. At the end of the year, Percy studied for his NEWTs, the highest qualification Hogwarts offered, and as Percy hoped to enter the Ministry of Magic, he needed top grades. As the exam came closer, Percy became increasingly edgy and gave very severe punishments to anybody who disrupted the quiet common room at night. Percy finished his 7 years at Hogwarts with top marks and would be remembered as one of the better students that passed through the school. On the way home, Percy had much to say about the ministry to the only person that would listen, his girlfriend Penelope. He told her that if he managed to get a job in the ministry, he'd have a lot of proposals about magical law enforcement. That summer, Percy's wish came true and he got a job in the Ministry of Magic, being assigned to the Department of International Magical Cooperation, and he worked for Barty Crouch, a man who Percy admired and respected. Unfortunately, his relationship with Penelope did not last after finishing school, and this was partly due to Percy jumping into work so much and only focusing on that. Percy absolutely loved his job, Ron even saying that he wouldn't come home if their father didn't force him to. It became an obsession for Percy, and whenever he was home, everyone avoided the topic of the ministry and his boss Barty Crouch, otherwise Percy would bore them with endless conversation about it. When Percy was finally of age to take his apparating test, he passed on his first try, and just to prove that he could, he apparated downstairs every morning. Despite loving his job, Crouch gave him a lot of worthless work, like a report on standardizing cauldron thickness, but Percy being Percy took this very seriously, and told his siblings to keep it down multiple times, once even screaming out the window to his older brothers in the backyard. Percy's siblings were even more annoyed with him after he demanded he needed his own room to work, despite them having guests over, making others double or even triple up in one room. During dinner, Percy tried to get the attention of the younger kids, clearing his throat and talking loudly about a top secret event, but no one took his bait, and Ron even rolled his eyes. The following morning, Percy, Bill, and Charlie apparated to the campsite for the Quidditch World Cup, meeting the others there who had been there for hours. When they got there, only hours after bashing the way Ludo Bagman ran his department, when he came face to face with them, Percy hurried forward with his hand outstretched, apparently his disapproval of Bagman not preventing him from sucking up to him. Percy then became embarrassed when his twins showed Bagman their fake wands, but when Bagman actually liked them, Percy froze in an attitude of stunned disapproval. When Percy saw Mr. Crouch on the campsite, Percy was humiliated in front of his family and friends when Crouch mixed up his name and called him Weatherby, and as he went pink, the twins burst out laughing. Unlike in the movie, in the book, they sat in the box seat with the Minister of Magic himself, which Percy was thrilled with, and anytime somebody important came in, he shot up and introduced himself, and when the Minister of Magic came, Percy bowed so low that his glasses fell off and shattered. Highly embarrassed, he fixed them with his wand and remained in his seat for the rest of the match, and he threw jealous looks at Harry, who Fudge greeted like an old friend, as they had met before. After the match, chaos ensued as Death Eaters in masks went after the Muggle landowners. Percy along with Bill, Charlie, and their father went to help break it up. Percy ended up getting a bloody nose, but they successfully drove them away after the dark mark was shown in the sky. After everything, Percy and his father had to work overtime to fix the huge messes made, and neither of them were home much for that whole week, something that bothered Mr. Weasley, but Percy not so much. Percy, however, did get overwhelmed, and one day he got a howler, and because he didn't open it, it exploded, leaving scorch marks on his desk and ruining his best quill. At home, tensions ran high, and one night, Percy called his father out for causing more trouble at the ministry, saying that he was unwise for giving a statement to the press after the Dark Mark incident without consulting ministry officials first, and Mrs. Weasley snapped at Percy, telling him not to blame his father. Bill and Charlie asked Percy to come see their younger siblings and friends off at King's Cross, but Percy said that he couldn't as he had to get back to work, and George jokingly said that maybe if he kept working hard, Crouch would know his name soon, making Percy go red in the face and everyone else laugh. To Percy's delight, he was eventually promoted to Crouch's personal assistant, and he received letters from his boss telling him that he was sick, and Crouch giving him instructions on what to do. Percy's first big task was to take Crouch's place at the Yule Ball. There he learned that his twin brothers were talking to Ludo Bagman about joke shop ideas, and he planned to snitch on them for this to their mother. Later, while talking to Bagman, Percy gave Harry a dirty look as he talked about the hiccup in the Triwizard Tournament, referring to Harry, who supposedly put his name in the Goblet of Fire when he was underage. Another look at how Percy always favored laws and rules over his friends and family, just like when he called his dad out about talking to the press. Percy later showed up in Crouch's place as one of the judges for the second task in the Triwizard Tournament. When Percy found out that part of the task was that his younger brother Ron was at the bottom of the lake, he was very white in the face, and when they finally made it to the surface, Percy came splashing out to meet them, and Percy did not let go of Ron until there was a blanket wrapped around him, despite Ron's protests. Over time, Percy was getting asked by many ministry workers as well as reporters from the Daily Prophet about Crouch, and he was constantly telling them that Crouch was on a well-deserved holiday. Around Easter, Percy got a letter from Ron asking if he had actually seen Crouch, and Percy responded with a short and irritated letter saying that he had not seen him, but that he recognized Crouch's handwriting from the letters he was getting, then told Ron not to bother him again unless it was important. A few weeks later, Crouch turned up at Hogwarts in a state of insanity, and he kept thinking that a tree was Percy. Moments later, Crouch disappeared and he was not found. Percy became very upset and was under a lot of strain. The ministry was trying to keep it hushed up, and Percy was hauled in for questioning about the instructions that Crouch had been sending him, and they said that he ought to have realized that Crouch was insane and should have reported to a superior. Percy, however, did not think to do this because when he was put in charge, he didn't question it. It was what he always wanted. They stopped allowing Percy to take Crouch's place, and for the third task, Cornelius Fudge took Crouch's place as the judge instead. During the third task, Harry was taken to the Riddle House, and there he witnessed Voldemort make his return to a full body. When Dumbledore and Harry reported this, however, it did not go over well with the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, who claimed that they were lying and that Dumbledore was trying to overthrow him. When Dumbledore reformed the Order of the Phoenix to fight Voldemort and his followers, all of the Weasleys that were of age joined right away, all except for Percy. Percy chose to go against his family and his friends, and he stuck by Fudge and the Ministry. It all started a week after term ended, and just as the family was getting ready to go to the Order's headquarters, Percy came home saying he was promoted. This surprised everyone, as he had just gotten into a load of trouble with the whole Crouch thing. Percy was very pleased with himself, even more than usual, and he told his father that he had been offered a position in Fudge's own office as junior assistant to the minister, a really good job for someone only a year out of Hogwarts. He expected his father to be impressed, but Mr. Weasley was not impressed at all. Mr. Weasley reckoned that Fudge only wanted Percy in his office because he wanted to use him to spy on their family, who Fudge knew were close to Dumbledore, the person that Fudge was against more than anyone in this moment, thinking that Dumbledore wanted to overthrow him. This made Percy angry, and he told his father that he'd been having to struggle against Mr. Weasley's lousy reputation ever since he joined the ministry, and that Mr. Weasley had no ambition, and that was why they were always poor. He then told his father that he was an idiot to run around with Dumbledore, that the only proof he had for Voldemort's return was Harry's word, and that wasn't good enough for Percy or the ministry, and said that Dumbledore was heading for big trouble and Mr. Weasley was going with him. Percy then finished saying that he knew where his loyalties lie, and it was with the ministry, and if his parents were going to become traitors to the ministry, he was going to make sure that everyone knew he did not belong to their family anymore. Percy then packed his stuff and left that night. He ended up getting an apartment in London, and one day, Mrs. Weasley went to visit him and try to fix things, but Percy just slammed the door in his mother's face without even giving her a chance. From then on, anytime Percy saw his father at work, he did not acknowledge him, making it clear that he stood by Fudge. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were so upset about the situation that everyone had to avoid saying Percy's name, otherwise Mr. Weasley would break whatever he was holding, and Mrs. Weasley would start crying. Percy was the note-taker for Harry's trial that determined if he would be expelled or not, and he did not give Harry any acknowledgement, nor did he acknowledge his father as he walked right past him after the trial. Percy was also very disappointed that Harry was not expelled, not even caring about the relationship that he and Harry had built over all those years. When the school year started for Percy's younger siblings, he learned that Ron had become a prefect just like him. He wrote Ron a letter, and in it, he said that he was glad that Ron followed in his footsteps rather than Fred and George's, and told Ron to stay away from Harry Potter as he was unbalanced, dangerous, and could jeopardize Ron losing his prefect badge and damage his future. He then told Ron to work with the lovely woman Dolores Umbridge, saying that she could help him deal with Harry if he was too scared to sever ties with him. He told Ron that siding with Dolores and the Ministry could make him head boy in his 7th year and ensure that he was on the right side in this fight. He finished by bashing on their parents and saying that he was waiting for an apology from them. Ron was furious when he saw this, and Percy did not get an answer. When Christmas came, Mrs. Weasley sent Percy a knitted sweater as she always did, but her eyes filled with tears when she got a package from Percy, sending the sweater back. One day, Percy accompanied 2 Aurors and the Minister of Magic himself to Hogwarts to bust a secret group that Harry was running. Percy laughed as Fudge made fun of Harry and Dumbledore, saying that it was a good one. He was once again the note-taker, and he quickly took notes as Dumbledore said that the club was his own army to overthrow the minister. Fudge then ordered Percy to duplicate his notes and send a copy to the Daily Prophet, and Percy stormed out to do so. A few months later, it came out that Fudge was wrong, and he was immediately fired from being Minister of Magic. Umbridge was sacked from Hogwarts, and the entire Wizarding world now sided with Dumbledore, Harry, as well as the Order of the Phoenix and everyone in it, including Percy's parents and siblings. All seemed like it would work out, and Percy would return home, but unfortunately, this was not the case. Percy still refused to side with his parents, and Dumbledore told a very upset Mrs. Weasley that people find it easier to forgive others for being wrong than being right. Percy just could not admit that he was wrong, and so, he continued to ignore his family and work hard in the ministry despite all of the new changes, like Rufus Scrimgeour taking Fudge's place as Minister of Magic. Percy, however, kept his position as junior assistant to the minister. Just like with Fudge, Percy was once again used by the Minister of Magic, though in a very different way. While Fudge used Percy to keep an eye on Mr. Weasley and the rest of his family, Scrimgeour was using Percy to get to Harry, who Scrimgeour was dying to work with to get the public off his back about fighting the Dark Lord. Scrimgeour used Percy as an excuse to visit the burrow where he knew Harry was staying for Christmas break, and when they walked through the door, there was a moment of painful silence. Percy broke the tension by saying Merry Christmas to his mother, and she threw herself into his arms, kissed him on the cheek, and began to tear up. Scrimgeour told the group that they were in the area, and that Percy could not resist dropping in to see everyone. However, Percy showed no sign of wanting to greet the rest of his family. Mr. Weasley, Fred, and George watched him stony-faced, knowing the real reason why they were there, and it was not to catch up. After Scrimgeour left with Harry, the whole reason behind their visit, an angry Fred, George, and Ginny splattered Percy's glasses with food, and Percy stormed out furious, not saying goodbye to any of them, something that made Mrs. Weasley cry off and on for the next week. At the end of that year, Dumbledore was killed, and Percy arrived at his funeral as part of Scrimgeour's entourage, but he did not acknowledge his siblings or his parents. The following summer, Percy was the only one in his family not to attend his brother Bill's wedding, something that again made his mother cry. The ministry was eventually overrun by Voldemort and his Death Eaters. Scrimgeour was killed, and a new minister named Pius Thicknesse took his place, but he was under the Imperius Curse and did whatever Voldemort wanted him to do. Over the next few months, Percy reflected on everything that had happened with his family, and he began to feel shame. He wanted to fix things, but he didn't know how or where he could see them, and moreover, the ministry was not easy to get out of, as they were locking up traitors every day. Luckily, he got his chance to escape in May when he got into contact with Aberforth, and he told Percy that Harry had returned to Hogwarts to fight. Percy made his way to the castle, and when he entered, he met most of his family, something that he did not expect so soon, causing him to stutter, asking if he was too late or if the battle had started. He then blurted out that he was a fool, an idiot, a pompous prat, and Fred finished his sentence saying, a ministry-loving, family-disowning, power-hungry moron. Percy swallowed and said that he was all of those things. Fred was the first to react by sticking a hand out to his brother. Mrs. Weasley burst into tears and pulled Percy into a strangling hug, but Percy's eyes were on his father, whom he had fallen out with the worst. He looked at Mr. Weasley and said that he was sorry, and Mr. Weasley blinked for a second, but then ran in to hug Percy too. When George asked what made him see sense, Percy said that it was a long time coming, but he didn't know how to make it back to his family. George then jokingly said that they did look to their prefects in times like these, and then said it was time to fight. As they made their way, Percy met Fleur for the first time, saying that he was happy to finally meet his sister-in-law. As the battle commenced, Death Eaters broke into the castle, and Percy and Fred were fighting a few of them off. When the one Percy was fighting's hood fell off, Percy, seeing that it was the Minister of Magic Pius Thicknesse, he jokingly greeted the minister and said that he was resigning. This made Fred scream out laughing, saying that Percy was joking and he hadn't heard him joke since, but they never heard the ending of that sentence, because just then, the wall they were next to exploded, knocking all of them back. As Percy got up, he ran to Fred and found him lying motionless on the ground. Percy ran over and held his brother close to him, crying and screaming. More Death Eaters arrived, and Percy refused to get up. He lay across Fred's body, shielding him from further harm. Ron stepped up, and as a tear went down his face, he grabbed Percy and told him that there was nothing they could do for him. A group of monstrous spiders then arrived, and together, Percy and Harry picked up Fred's dead body and got it out of harm's way. Percy then bellowed out Rookwood's name, the man who had blown the wall up, and Percy sprinted off to pursue his brother's murderer. When there was a break in the battle, Percy and his father went to retrieve Fred's body where they had left it, and they brought him to the Great Hall. There, the family looked down at their fallen sibling and son. Percy put an arm around Ron when he arrived, and together they cried, still unable to believe what had happened. The break in the battle ended when it appeared that Harry had given his life, but when Neville Longbottom stepped up, the battle reignited. At the end of the fight, Percy and his father took Thicknesse down, and the battle finally came to a close when Harry came back and finished Voldemort off once and for all. Even though they won, however, the price was high, and Percy and the rest of his family mourned the death of Fred. Percy took this especially hard because he felt that he had lost so much time with Fred before he died, and guilt overwhelmed him. Even over time, the guilt did not go away, though Percy learned to live with it. Now that the ministry was rid of Voldemort and his followers, Kingsley Shacklebolt took over as Minister of Magic, and a new and improved Percy ended up as a high-ranking official in the Department of Magical Transportation. Percy eventually married a woman named Audrey, and they had two daughters named Molly and Lucy. When Percy went to the 2014 Quidditch World Cup, Rita Skeeter noticed that he had aged considerably since the Battle of Hogwarts and wrote about this in her article. Percy was at platform 9 3/4 in September of 2017, most likely to drop his daughters off at Hogwarts, and he was overheard by Harry talking about broomstick regulations, and Harry thought to himself to stay away from him so he wouldn't be bored. Percy was a very driven person, and he often overlooked friends and family to reach his goals. This led to him being inconsiderate and straight up mean to those close to him, and ultimately, after pushing everyone away, all he had was work. Over time, however, he learned to sort out his priorities and learned that in order to be happy, you need people you love surrounding you. Unfortunately, he realized this very late, and because of this, he felt that he had lost so much time with Fred, something that he would never fully get over. This did teach him a valuable lesson, however, and from then on, he ensured that he made time for both work and his loved ones, and ultimately, this made him a much better husband and father. Percy might have had his moments that made readers hate him, but in the end, he learned from his mistakes and finally proved that he was a proper Weasley, showing that he was down to earth and caring. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You can follow me on social media to see more of my personal life and see more of this little dude. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook for Movie Flame updates. And I want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons listed below. If you want to be featured in the next video, plus get a bunch of other rewards, become a patron today. Again, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you press that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great videos on the way.